Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I've got some brads which I do change out halfway through the video. I have an old piece of paint pouring that I did that I don't totally love. I have the Simon Says stamp papers from the July kit. I have the bell jar from Tim Holtz Alterations from ages ago. I also have his Tiny Text Halloween from last year, I want to say. And then the July 22 card kit stamp set as well. So I'm going to try and incorporate the Simon Says stamp kit into a Halloween project. I do like how it turned out. Anyway, so I cut the bell jar twice, once out of watercolor paper and once out of some acetate. And I also have the rest of the bell jar and a scrap of watercolor cardstock cut out of some watercolor cardstock. And then I have some archival ink which I'm using for the butterfly from the stamp set that is going to go inside the bell jar. And then I will grab another block for the what will be like the, not really the sentiment because this is a mixed media piece, but kind of like the wording on the piece. And I'll show you, well, you'll see what it says in a second. And I'm lining that up with the edge of the piece of cardstock so that when I cut it out just by hand, it will be as straight as possible. It's just an easier way to cut things out. So for the bell jar stand, I have some walnut stain which I'm inking just randomly around the edges, and then I will use some water, I believe, yes, to spritz the piece and then just dab off the excess. And then what I wanted to do was go back in so that the where the water landed, it wasn't as white, like stark white, but I decided to grab some hickory smoke instead as just to give another bit of interest to the stand. And I added that to the plate randomly again, but mostly to the places where the water had sort of picked up the ink. I'm then going to take the bell jar with the butterfly, and what I've done is I've taken some salvaged patina and smushed it on my mat and added some water and grabbed a paintbrush and just very random colouring. I could have done a ton more to this butterfly, but honestly this project took me ages. So although I enjoyed the process, it took forever. So yeah, but I have to get used to that because that's the fun of mixed media. It's sort of, you know, it takes a long time because you've got to dry in between layers and things like that. But when you're filming as well, yeah, it just adds in a bit of trickiness. So I just put on very loosely some salvage patina onto the wings, and then just drying them off with my heat tool. And then I'm going to go back in and just try and add a bit more, like a deeper shade of that colour. I could have actually added some more ink onto my mat and then just taken it more directly. But in the end I just kept playing with it until I was happy with it. So just the last little bit. And then I will also dry that off again so that when I come in next with the colour for the body of the butterfly, because the blue will be dry, it won't pick up that, it won't move that distress ink because it will normally. So got the body in some walnut stain, and then I'm taking the walnut stain again and going around the edges very quickly. Just to get some colour onto that. And then I want to add, this is kind of an old thing, I think we used to do this right at the beginning. when everybody was spritzing and smushing and doing all that kind of fun stuff. So I have some hickory smoke here on my mat, which again I've smushed on there, technical term. And then I'm adding some of that to the top of, with a paintbrush and some water, just to the top of the bell jar, and then I'm going to add some water to it to help move it down, so it kind of looks like it's running down the bell jar. And it's very subtle, but it is there. So if I'd used black soot, that would have had more impact, and if I'd used an even darker, I don't know if there is a darker brown, but if I'd used more of an intense brown around the edges, that more of that would have taken effect as well, because everywhere that you have your distressing, even though you dry in between, like we did with the butterfly, it's still going to react. It's always going to react. So it's kind of cool, because when you're doing things like this, the butterflies, for instance, is still going to react, and some of their colour's going to drag. So once I had that done, I then used what was left on my mat and just used the same paintbrush. I didn't even clean any of it off, and just picked up colour that was left and just splattered all over that, and then obviously dried that off. So there's a quick look at just some of the effect on there. So the next thing I wanted to do was to put the acetate on. Acetate is very difficult, like vellum. It's very difficult to know how to attach to things because it's see-through. So you are always going to see adhesive through it. And so I grabbed a heavy duty, it doesn't have to be this heavy duty, hole punch thing, and punched a hole in there, and that's what the brad's for. It's just to hold the two pieces together. So I did change my brad. This is also a Tim Holtz brad from forever ago, same as the ones I showed you at the beginning, but this one I needed a bigger one. The other ones were actually too small for the hole that I used, but I actually like this one because it looks like a screw head, so it just again adds some extra something when it comes to like a mixed media project. So for the papers, I decided to go with one of the little they look like ATCs sort of sized pieces. They were like 4 individual ones on a page, so I grabbed one of those, just cut it out, and then I'm doing an old school technique again where I'm tearing the edge of the paper. So I then also decided on this darker butterfly background piece, and again I just tore it, but what I wanted was the exposed paper edge. So I used the one that was on the bigger piece, that makes sense, and then I will tear an extra piece off. And so I'm kind of using not the first piece that I tore off, but the second piece. So I've got that edge, see where the white edge of that is exposed, of the inner core of the paper. And then because that's exposed like that, you can ink it. So I'm inking with black soot. I do actually use some walnut stain over the top, and even going over the other edge, even though it's a black piece of paper, it's still going to have a white core, so it still has a white edge somewhere. So I inked around the edge of all of them. The longer one actually is going to get wrapped around the board. And then again I splattered the same as I did with the bell jar. So now I'm going to take some collage medium in the crazing. I thought this would be fun to use. I'm trying to use all my collage mediums because otherwise they just sit there and go hard. That's no good. So I thought the crazing would be a nice addition, and you'll see how we'll try and accentuate or highlight those crazings. So if you don't know what crazing is compared to crackle, this is kind of how I try and remember it. The crazing is like the baby version of crackle. So crackle, you get obviously it depends how thick the medium is on your project, but you will get much bigger cracks. Whereas the crazing is like hairline, very fine cracks in inverted commas. And so it's a much finer crackle rather than or craze rather than a crackle, if that made any sense. So just think of it like the crackle's the big mama, and then the crazing is like the baby. But that's how I remember, like size wise. Still depends on how much and how thick the layer of medium is, so the stuff that we're putting on now, as to how much you're going to get, or how big those lines or crazings will be. But this is just a thin layer, and basically I'm taking it, because it is a collage medium, it means it's a glue, so you can use it on the back of it, which is what I do here, to get it into place. And then once it's in place, I then go over the top. If you are using it as just an adhesive, so you don't want it over the top as well, then just make sure the back's covered completely so that it sticks and doesn't curl up on the edges, and then you'll be fine. But I just went hell for leather and put it everywhere. And then with the longer piece, like I said earlier, I actually wrapped the bits that were sort of sticking out the top. They actually wrapped around, that was just a happy coincidence, they wrapped around the edge of the board. So I have previously taken some paper clay, air dry clay, and I'm playing around with that more and more. I think I might get into resin, I'm not sure yet. But what I did was, these were from little molds and texture plates that I have. So I made these ages and ages ago, playing around with it, trying to work out the best way to use it. And so now that they're completely dry, I am taking some gesso and adding that. This is black gesso, but you get white gesso as well, and I'm adding that over the top, and what it does is it gives it a tooth for whatever else you put on top of that. If you put a wax over the top, the wax won't take anything else except wax, so just bear that in mind. But if we do what we're doing today, then this is fine. You can then put acrylics or paints over the top, and you'll be fine. So the only thing to bear in mind with this is that obviously this is wet onto the paint is wet, and it's going over the paper clay. So once you re-wet it, it does like rehydrate it a little. So this is not the clay, this is air drying clay. So this is the clay that literally air dries rather than being baked in an oven. So just to bear that in mind when you then move your pieces. So to get the crazing to come out, now that those pieces are done and dried and off to the side, I'm taking a walnut stain crayon, distress crayon, and just working in small areas. I tried it a couple different ways, and actually eventually, for me, putting it straight on the thing and then just using my finger to rub it into the crazing works the best. It is better if you work in little areas, like I'm doing here, because once the crayon is actually dry, and it dries fairly quickly, then it's permanent. So yeah, work fairly quickly. But once you get used to it, as you're working with it, you'll know and you'll understand it more. But yeah, it's really cool, quite cool stuff to work with. So on the darker piece of pattern paper, all I did was I went over the areas that you would naturally see it, because dark on dark you're not really going to see that. So I went over the butterflies, the flowers were like the main things I went over, so that you could actually see that. And I will lift this, and in real life you can see it much better. Bear in mind I put a thin layer on as well, so you can't see it as well as you would have if you had like a lot more product or a lot more medium on there. But because I also smushed it all over, because I was just slapping it on, it is off the actual pattern paper, so that's why I was going around the edge of the edge of the board as well. But I still wanted some of that piece that I'd originally paint poured, and there is a video somewhere. I still wanted that to show through somewhere, so you can just about make out the crazy in there, but like I say, in real life it's much clearer and very easy to see. So once I've done that, now we get to try and, assemble this whole thing. So I have sped this bit up quite a bit more because, like I say, this does take a long time to make a mixed media project, but it is actually a lot of fun, and I feel like I'm going in that direction more at the moment. I do a lot of different crafts, so you'll see a lot of different things on this channel, but anyway, but all artsy stuff. So I'm using the medium, the collage medium in the matte, so not the crazing one, and I am just using a spatula, no, craft knife, no, what's that thing called, palette knife, to just blob the medium onto the back of the piece and then pop it in place. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to work in layers, and I'll explain that in a minute. So I needed to get those two layers on, those two pieces on first before I pop. There's something we're going to do in a minute, so I don't want to give it away. So I'm using the bell jar now as a guide where I want it roughly, so I can see that I can put my bats on now. So I have two little bats. I have that decorative corner, so I thought that looked quite cool, so I put that in the corner, and then adding my other little bat on there. And don't worry if you get a bit of glue ooze, not the end of the world. The spider and the pumpkin I will put on afterwards, and you'll see why in a second. So once I had the bats on, so those three pieces, the cobble, the bats and the corner piece, are all ones that I could put on without it interfering with anything else. So I kind of had an idea of where I was going with this. So to help level up the bell jar with the cobble, I just used some darker, I happened to have some brown foam, and this is just fun foam. So I have a little bottle that I have some collage medium that I spent 9 hours putting into this little bottle, so I will just buy the bottled version from now on. Yeah, that's handy for little things if you want to use it, because it is a glue at the end of the day. So I got 2 layers of the foam on there, and that sort of levels things up, and had to trim it down a little bit. So I have some of the blue, I missed it myself in the thing, I think it's like a jadey blue, of the Nouveau embellishment mousse, couldn't think of the word. And I know you're not supposed to put your fingers in this stuff, but I was on a roll, so I just ran with it. And also I'm trying to revive these, which I don't know if I've said that before, but anyway. So I did add the blue to the cobbles at the bottom, which I thought would look quite cool, and then the blue to the corner piece. The blue was to tie in with the blue-green of the paper in the background. And I'm sorry, I did go a little quick on these names of these. This is the black ash, which I thought would be very cool on the bats and the spider, sort of just highlighting them, and it brings out kind of like a silvery, almost like a charcoaly sort of color. So my spider, the mold that I have for this is very deep and detailed, so it's actually very difficult. So actually my spider has half her legs missing, and I just kind of rolled with it. So when I was actually putting this on, this is where using a dry paintbrush instead of your finger would actually be better. 1, because you're not putting your finger in your medium, and 2, because you can actually get into places better, especially with something so delicate. So this third color is actually a corally color. I think it's called something coral, and it's the only orangey color I had in this type of medium, so I went with it. I actually put it on a couple of times just to try and strengthen the orange side of it, but it's enough. There's enough of an orange hint there, so I ran with it. So, but for me, I would want more of an intense orange. Bear in mind, you can also paint these in different colors. The gesso is there just as a base, and what you do with it after that is, completely up to you. I like having the black gesso and then this sort of highlighted shimmeriness on top. It just does something. It's something very magical about it to me, and which is why I adore it. So I also took some of the black ash just to tie the bell jar and stand in a bit more, and I just went around the edge of the bell jar because I can move that acetate out the way, and then did the edge of the stand as well, just with my finger again. And when you actually rub that, I found that when I was rubbing it off like that, I'm not really rubbing it off, you kind of, I suppose, buff it, and so it actually shimmers and shines more. So now that I have those pieces ready to go, I've lined up where I want my stand, and I'm just using the collage medium again, just in my little squeezy bottle, and just adding some adhesive where I think I need it, to basically to the foam and what would be the edge of the bottom edge of the bell jar, so that it sticks in place in the right place, if that made sense. So, and getting the bell jar on there. And now to put my little wording, I don't know what you call it in mixed media, because it's not a sentiment like you would have on a card, but I didn't want the like the acetate part of the bell jar moving, although that could have been quite cool. So I actually put a line of adhesive underneath where I knew I was going to put the little wording strip, and then pop that on top. And then I'm going to pop my pumpkin on, and then that was a bit squeaky, and then decide where I'm going to put my spider. I do pop her just at the bottom by the pumpkin. It sort of makes the most sense to me. And then also you've still got some of that vintagey paper in the background sticking out, which I think is really cute, and a very different kind of Halloween. So guys, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this. I loved making this. I had so much fun. I got to reuse an old piece of art that I didn't really like, and I will definitely bring this out this year at Halloween as a piece of decor, if I can actually get all my decor stuff out and actually decorate this year. But there you go, guys. There's lots of dimension. I've got loads to learn about this still, but everyday objects are also worth doing and using on your mixed media projects. But I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you guys give this a go. This is so much fun. I would also make all those extra bits before, so that you can just grab them as you need them, like the molded pieces and things like that. And yes, happy Halloween. I will see you in the next one, guys. Bye for now.